Welcome to Breaking Beliefs. My name is Amy Vetter, and this is where we explore the thoughts that shape our lives and our work. Each episode uncovers how challenging our limiting beliefs creates space for authentic growth and sustainable success. Let's break some beliefs together. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Traci Granston. She is an award-winning surgeon, executive leader, and corporate board member, passionate about supplying her unique mix of strategic and governance expertise to organizations targeting emerging opportunities within the healthcare sector. She has distinguished service on 3 boards to date, both corporate and not-for-profit, in addition to roles serving on corporate DEI and technology advisory committees. She has 20-plus years of experience in healthcare practice leadership, in addition to current service as an SVP of strategy for high-growth startup in the medical technology space. She is an expert in machine learning and AI usage within the healthcare space, author and sought-after thought leader on AI-related ethics, risks, opportunities, and responsible use, and a career-long thought leader and innovator. During this episode, we talk about how she went from being an orthopedic surgeon and transitioned to managing AI in healthcare. She discussed her career journey from competitive figure skating and medical training to her current role. Traci shared insights about her experience as a female surgeon, including her decision to leave private practice for an executive MBA program and her current work using AI to improve the healthcare processes. I hope that you enjoy this interview that I had with Traci. So many great nuggets in there for you to take away. And if it resonates with you, please share, like, and make sure that your colleagues also get to listen to this episode and understand how it could help them in their lives as well. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. I'm very excited today to have Dr. Traci Granston with us. Traci, before we get started, do you want to give the audience a little background on yourself?
Thanks, Amy, for having me. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, which in and of itself sometimes is a bit surprising. Most orthopedic surgeons are male, so being a female orthopedic surgeon in and of itself was surprising, and had kind of the ideal, perfect career, and chose to make a career pivot sort of mid-life, and now have found myself into another very exciting role. And many people, ask, how did I get to this great role now, managing AI in a health tech company? So it's a bit of a windy path to get to my current role.
I can't wait to talk about this. So great. Well, why don't we start out? Give us a little background on yourself. Where did you grow up? What were your parents? What was their occupation?
I grew up in Bellevue, Washington, which is a suburb of Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Very small little community, which is now much larger. At the time, I was a competitive figure skater when I was young, was uber competitive. I was skating against Rosalind Sumner. For any ice skating fans, she went on to win a silver medal in the Olympics. I quit at around age 11. This will give you some insight into my personality, but because I fell in a competition and got 3rd place instead of 1st or 2nd, and I didn't get to go on to junior nationals, and so I decided this sport was not for me, and I quit on the spot.
Wow.
And switched over to having horses, probably the next most expensive sport. So my poor parents, who were very supportive of, anything we wanted to try, and spent a lot of time in 4-H and horses, which I think really taught me a lot about drive and work ethic. And, you have to do what you say when you've got a horse that's depending on you. And so I think it was a great transition at the time. Then I went to college at University of Washington. I was in a sorority. I was one of the few in my sorority that was pre-med, so would find myself having to, stay in and, do a physics lab Friday morning when the rest of the sorority was out at an exchange or doing something fun. But I was able to balance fun and work and do well in my pre-med courses. And then I went to medical school at Vanderbilt in Nashville. Quite the change to move from Seattle to Nashville. Learned a lot about humidity and Southern food and all of that, but really it's my only private education experience, and really that my time at Vanderbilt is what created me into the physician I am today. certainly had some challenges at Vanderbilt too, having an advisor questioning why I wanted to go into orthopedic surgery when that wasn't really a field for women, but successfully navigated all of that and then did my orthopedic residency at Case Western in Cleveland. I was there for 6 years, did a clinical research year as I was going to go into academic medicine, and then decided I couldn't be all things, including being a mother. And so I decided to go into private practice. Came back to Seattle and did my hand fellowship at Harborview, which is our major trauma hospital here, and then joined my practice in Seattle. And I practiced there for 22 years and have recently done this career shift.
Okay. Let's go backwards a little bit. So growing up, what did your parents do for a living?
My mother is an art teacher. She was a teacher and then an art teacher. She had a master's in art history. My father was electrical engineer, and then had his master's in business. So he actually owned his own company. And in the Seattle area at the time, he owned a computer data storage company. This is way, way back, think about before you had your own personal computer. So he would store data for people. They would pay to store the data. And when I was a kid and you would go into his office, these computers were built. They were above, they had a space below them for all the heat, and they would take up an entire room, these massive, massive computers and servers. That then kind of morphed into a company for Microsoft, which was a direct mail marketing company. So in the early days of Microsoft, when you would buy a Microsoft product, you would register the product. It would go to his company. They would keep track of the customers. And when a new product line would come out, they would do the marketing for it, the advertisement, and they would send it out. So they started early days with Microsoft. And then he ended up retiring at a relatively young age and sold the company separate from the office building in Seattle and was able to retire in his 50s.
That's awesome. So did you have any interest in computers then, like seeing your dad's?
It's an interesting question. No one in my family was medical, and when I told my dad I wanted to go to medical school, he kind of questioned it and he said, "Oh, let me have you talk to my friend who's a pediatrician." And I thought, great. So I go to have lunch with his friend who's a pediatrician, and the whole point of me meeting with a pediatrician was to explain how difficult it is to be a physician and how hard it is, and it's probably not the career path for me. But it didn't dissuade me. And so kind of once I went through that, he realized that I really, really did have a passion for it, and that's what I wanted to do, and was very supportive from that time forward.
So why wouldn't he have wanted you to go into the medical?
He was worried about, long hours, working hard. His friends who were physicians had, even back in that time, had burnout, and no one in our family was medical. He had a business where I could have worked. We had a family business that was very successful. That was not his business. That was plumbing and electrical. It was university mechanical contracting, so plumbing and electrical, HVAC. So there was a lot of other options for me. So he just wanted to make sure I had thought about it. But honestly, in my undergrad time at University of Washington, I tried all different classes. I tried business classes. I tried, engineering classes. I tried all of them to see what I liked, and I really liked the basic science classes. And so I just decided I was going to follow my passion and my dream and not have, external forces tell me who I should be, because I knew what I actually cared about.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the ice skating story because I think that's interesting. So your parents were okay with you being at that level and just quitting that day, or how did that go?
It is an interesting story. I had the most amazing mother who supported anything we wanted and always told you could be anything you wanted to be. And from the time I was about 2 years old, I would skate around and, wanted to watch ice skating. And this is back when you had to watch it on TV when it was being shown live. And so we would, have popcorn and watch ice skating. And my grandmother was a seamstress. And so she would, make these beautiful ice skating, costumes, even though I wasn't skating at the time. And so when I was about 4 or 5, my mom finally took me to start skating. There was a local ice rink that was kind of up on stilts, and it ended up getting condemned because it was deemed not safe for people to be skating in it because of the weight of the ice. But so I started very close to my home, which is, 5-10 minutes. But once that rink closed, we had to go to North Seattle. So it was about probably a 30-minute drive. And my mom just said, well, if you want to do this, we'll do this. And so we'd get up at 4:30 in the morning. She would cook me a hot breakfast. We'd get in the car, drive up. I would skate for a few hours. Then I would come back, go to school, and then I would leave school early in the afternoon to go to ballet because you have to also do ballet. So it was
Mhm.
very much an all-in kind of thing. I think at the time, I was very good at the time. I was, winning first place most often, so I was expected to win this competition, and I think a couple of things happened at that competition. One, I think I realized that the sport itself is based on those 4 minutes when you're on the ice, and when you fall,
Mhm.
even though you've landed that jump 287 times the week before, it doesn't matter. It's those 4 minutes only. And one of the judges at the time, they've changed this in ice skating, but one of the judges at the time was the father of the girl who got second place. And
Mhm.
so I think that was probably my first time I understood the concept of fairness. And I thought, gosh, this doesn't seem right. And I also, at that point in my life, was having to make decisions around. I couldn't go to sleepover slumber parties because I had to get up to skate in the morning. When my family went on a ski trip, I had to stay behind with my coach because winter for skiing is the same time as the competitive season for ice skating. And one, you couldn't get hurt skiing, and also you couldn't miss competition. So I was already seeing all of the life choices I was going to have to balance. And even at that age of like 11, I was able to think, well, so what if I even went to the Olympics and won gold? What would my life look like after that? And at the
Mm.
time, you would have been, doing ice capades and traveling. And I realized that that's probably not what I want to be doing. And I loved my time ice skating. And even today, I still skate. I love it.
Oh.
But it was a good choice, I think, and I was very supported by my mom. And I think probably selfishly, she was thinking, I don't have to get up so early and drive you to Seattle every day,
Right.
right? But I think because there were so many pieces to it, and I had thought about it, even though I quit on the spot, as we talked about it after, there was a lot of things that I wasn't liking about the sport, and so she was very supportive of me finding my passion. And probably like a year later, my sister and I decided to get horses, which was a great choice because it forced us to think about how are you going to pay for horses? My parents made us pay for half of everything. How are you going to make sure you have time for school and your horse? Because your horse isn't going to stop needing you to take care of it. So it taught us so many good life lessons that in retrospect, my mom would tell you is probably the best choice we ever made. My dad wasn't so thrilled with another expensive sport and having to, pay, but making us pay for half of everything. And we were young. We were probably I was probably 12 or 13, so we started cleaning houses and babysitting and all these things to support having horses.
That's amazing. So when did the medical, field interest you? Like, where did that begin?
I think probably related to the injuries from ice skating. I remember thinking it was really great that you could be injured and someone knew it was wrong and they would tell you
Mhm.
how you'd get better and what they told you actually worked. And so definitely interested there. And then having horses for a while, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I realized that I really cared, as much as I loved animals, I really cared more about fixing people and getting them back to something that they really enjoy, which is truly the field of orthopedics. It's an amazing specialty where you can fix problems and get people back to doing the things that they love and are important to them.
Mhm. That's very cool. So, uh, that was a time where there weren't as many women going into fields like that. So how did you have the confidence to do it? I mean, because you were being dissuaded, it sounded like a lot of different places by your family friends, even an advisor, there was a lot of people kinda telling you negative, so what in your head was keeping you moving forward?
I've thought a lot about this, and I actually have done some speaking around this, but I was just very much certain that that's what I wanted to do. When you start in medical school, the first thing you do, at least back then, was anatomy. So you're in cadaver lab, and I was so interested in the anatomy of the hand and the extremities, and I just knew that that was my passion. And so whenever people would challenge me, I kind of thought, well, why not me? Why can't I do this? I'm going to show you that I can. And so at the time, only 1% of orthopedic surgeons were women. And so I understand why my advisor was kind of saying, hey, maybe this isn't for you. Maybe you should think about it. Because it's also frustrating to think you're going to make it and go into something. And the way that it works for matching in medical school is you try to get interviews in the specialty you want, you interview, and then on one day you open an envelope to see if you actually matched. And I think he was, trying to make sure that I knew that might be a slim chance. And if you don't match, it's hard because you just are picking up whatever's left is open, and it's usually called a transitional year, and it's kind of a big bummer. And so I think he was trying to say like, hey, probably not a great chance you're going to get a spot in orthopedics. But I never really I never once considered that I couldn't do it, and I knew I wanted to. So I was like, watch me, I'm gonna do it. And I ended up matching the best program in the country. I think when you really want to do something and that's what your true, passion or calling or whatever it is, you aren't going to let these little obstacles get in your way, and you're going to find a way to do it. So, it also speaks to when you're super tired and want to give up. If you really care about it, you won't give up and you'll keep doing all the things you need to do to get to your goal.
Yeah. Do you think, your mom's encouragement helped you have that inner confidence?
Very much. My mom, she's unfortunately has passed away now, but she was just one of those incredible people who believed that you could be anything you wanted. My sister has a pretty phenomenal career as well. And so I think we were just supported by her at such a young age. She also was a substitute teacher, art teacher in high school, and we would have various different people living with us temporarily who were, struggling or having a hard time. And when we were younger, we were kind of annoyed. We're like, this person is living here now, but it just goes to show you how much my mom believed in people. And when my mom passed away, people reached out to me that I had never even known on Facebook saying, I just want you to know that your mom had a significant impact in my life and changed the trajectory of my life because she, let me live at your house for 2 weeks or whatever it was. And so she just is one of those really special people who always saw the good in humans. And she encouraged my sister and I to, be whatever we wanted. So yeah, very much. I attribute a lot of that to my mom.
Yeah. It also sounds like she was a healer too, just in a different way.
In a different way, yes, very much. She healed people
Uh,
through art.
yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it is a path. So in your private practice, you joined a practice or you started one up yourself?
I joined one. So I
Okay.
joined a very established orthopedic practice in the Seattle area, and really had a fantastic practice for 22 years. I had very, very busy practice where you had to wait, 4 to 6 weeks to see me. I had very full surgery schedule. And really, probably what the shift for me has a lot to do with the greater healthcare issues, in our country, is that as a hand surgeon, I came and did a hand fellowship at Harborview. And so I'm a hand specialist, but practicing in an orthopedic group. And hand surgeries are kind of high volume, but low billing. So I would do 13, 14 surgeries in a day, whereas,
Oh,
a
wow.
joint or spine surgeon might do 2 to 4 surgeries in a day. So much more volume with patients. And I can't bill as much as, a big spine surgery. And so, the question was becoming, should I see more patients? Should I do more surgeries? And I was already doing, 350 to 400 patients in the office, seeing those patients, and then doing 60 to 70 to 80 surgeries a month. And so I just felt like I could handle that, but I didn't want to do more because it would compromise, who I was as a physician, because I really took time to get to know my patients and know their families. And I didn't want to be rushed. And I didn't want to move to a model where I wasn't the one making the decision for surgery, meaning that a mid-level would see the patient, decide for surgery, and I'd meet him on the day of surgery. I just wasn't comfortable with that. And I know plenty of physicians like that model and do that. But for me and the way that I practiced medicine, I knew my patients at a deeper level. And so I just didn't want to compromise that. So I decided that I would go back because, what else would you do? I would go back and get another degree. So I went back and got my executive MBA at University of Washington. And I personally or purposely picked the executive MBA program the way it was structured, but there also was an opportunity to do, international immersion, and it had a lot of networking opportunities. But I unfortunately started that the fall of 2019, so my in-person experience was cut very short
Mm.
and turned into
Mm.
a remote program.
Yeah.
But it was a 2-year program, and it was 4 days a month. So I didn't get the international immersion, didn't get all the networking. But the good thing during that time was they really focused on, one of the things they focused on was making sure your LinkedIn profile was up to date. And I remember the conversation very clearly with the career network management person saying, why would I update my LinkedIn profile? I'm just a surgeon. What am I going to put on there? And so that was the first time someone talked to me about, like, sort of what is your value proposition? What do you bring? And was able to say, well, don't you, manage an operating room? Don't you understand risk? Don't you manage, profit and loss for your practice? Don't you think about all these things? I'm like, oh yeah, but, so help me sort of quantify that I'm more than just a surgeon. I have these other things that I also do. And so we put that information on my LinkedIn profile. And a couple of weeks later, the current company I work for, a recruiter reached out and said, hey, we might have a role you'd be interested in. So I look at all of these things as, interesting timing of when things happened and how I found my way to my current role.
Yeah. What did you say your value proposition was? Like, what did you
It
offer?
talked a lot about, being able to make quick decisions and understanding risk and, driving, good clinical outcomes for patients. Because everything I ever did in practice and in my current job is really, what's best for patients. And from that lens, it's pretty easy to make decisions. You're not having to make tough decisions because you always know why you're making them and who you're making them for. And so we talked quite a bit about that. And I think that resonated with my company because that is kind of even today, for almost 5 years later, what we are still doing is it's a company that processes prior authorizations for insurance companies, but we are from the lens of what's best for the patient, not necessarily what's best for the health plan. So not, worrying too much about the financial benefit, but when you focus on what's best for the patients, the finances follow.
Mm-hmm. So what interested you about doing this?
Well,
Like,
I knew I was going to be leaving clinical medicine and somehow doing something in healthcare on a bigger scale. I never ever dreamed I would be doing prior authorization. Most physicians don't like prior authorization and complain about it, and so that was not like my North Star of, "Ooh, I'm going to go look for this company." But when I started talking to them and understanding how they were trying to get out of the way of physicians that were providing, good care and really just worrying about areas where they maybe weren't or where there were some issues, and thinking about, and this was back in 2020, thinking about how, AI can automate things. It really was interesting to me in thinking about impacting on a broader scale. And so I came on just very part time as a physician reviewer. So I would be the one that would be reviewing the cases to determine if they should be approved or not for an insurance company. And after a short amount of time, I started spending more hours there, and then was a couple years in was moved over to the strategy side, which is where I am today, where I'm one of the ones who is, helping train the machine, deciding for machine learning, deciding, where we use AI and how we use AI and when we use it. And trying to think about more than just the individual authorization, a single point in time. Someone's having a problem for a while. It's not just today where you need an authorization. So, do we know what they're going to need in 3 or 4 weeks, or do we know what they're going to need in 3 months? And can we make sure, more of a second opinion model, that they're getting the right care at the right time? And so, with that comes a whole ton of strategy and thinking. And it's really been a very exciting field that I would have never said, some years ago, "Oh, hey, this is what I'm going to do in my career."
yeah. So as far as AI and machine learning coming into the medical field, because there's so much out there right now about it and whether the answers are better than a doctor and so forth, what kind of feelings do you have about it?
I think the answers probably are never going to be better than a doctor, just because there's the art of medicine that you can't teach a machine.
Mhm.
So the way that we're using it at the company and the way I think about it is, can you use it for predictable things? And that's where AI is very good, is in predictable things. So for example, when an authorization comes in, let's say you're sending in a request to have a knee replacement. Well, we know that you have to have certain x-ray findings, you have to have done certain things, so we can use the machine to go through and look through those clinical records and find all those pieces, and if it finds it, it just approves it right away. That to me is a fantastic use of AI. What would happen in the past is this case would pend and a nurse or a physician would look at it and it could take some, hours or days to approve it, and all the while the patient's wondering if this is going to be approved. The other
Mhm.
thing that we do is, if the request is submitted and let's say we don't see all the pieces, like maybe you need an MRI because it's for a spine surgeon, we don't see it, we ask the person, the end user, can you submit an MRI so we can review this? So we're looking at it in real time and getting the stuff while we actually have the person on the portal, because missing information is a huge pain point for prior authorization, and it can sometimes take days. You can imagine if, let's say in the old world, you would fax in a request. There's not an MRI, but we need the MRI. So now you pick up the phone and call a practice. A different person answers the phone who has no idea what you're talking about or why you need an MRI. They maybe put
Mhm.
you on hold or they leave a message. And, it's back and forth like that. And it can take days. And so that's why people will get frustrated, is the delay in making a decision. So we've kind of eliminated all that problem using AI. What we don't use AI for and never will is for saying that, no, you shouldn't have this procedure. If we can't find all the pieces of information, then it pens for a nurse and then ultimately a physician to look at it. And we don't ever intend to take that away because there are very specific, unique circumstances. There may be a reason why surgery now for you makes sense versus everyone else doesn't quite make sense. So that's kind of that art of medicine. And there's things to consider around like, social demographics for patients and where they live and do they have rides and can they get to the care and can they do all the things? And you can never really train a machine all those pieces and parts. And so automating what you can and getting out of the way of physicians, I think is important, but making sure that we're considering, the individual characteristics of each patient too is really important.
So any predictions you have for the future with it?
Well, I do think that there's going to be a lot of models where you just see an AI physician, and if maybe you have got like a common cold or a sinus infection, maybe that's okay.
Mhm.
I probably myself would avoid that in general just because, the misdiagnosis can cause lots of other problems. But I do think a lot of hospitals who are bumping up against financial crisis right now with, decreased reimbursements from Medicare and increased costs of staff and supplies and everything else, that's a quick way to save money. I don't know that that's the right way. I think the bigger question is what are we as a country going to do about our healthcare system in general? And are we
Mhm.
gonna fix Medicare and the decreasing reimbursements? And are we gonna prevent I retired a decade early from clinical practice, and I'm not alone. So several physicians are leaving because of the financial pressures. So I do think the knee-jerk reaction is gonna be, "Well, we'll just stick AI in there, and we'll use it here and there," but it's never gonna be as good, and part of one of the, privileges of being a physician is getting to know all the specific things about you as a patient and your family and what matters to you, and that helps determine, your care plan and when does it make sense, let's say, for an elective surgery, and when doesn't it make sense, and I don't think we can ever train AI to understand that.
Yeah. So is it that excites you now or that
I would have never dreamed I would have been excited about the career I have working for a prior auth company, but I am sitting in a space where I'm managing all of the clinical strategy for the company, and we're thinking about how we go above and beyond utilization management. So we're just recently talking to CMS about regulations for AI and how we think about it, why we think prior auth is important, but maybe not the way it's done today. So being able to look at a massive problem within the healthcare system and solve it and figure out how to make things better to me is like an amazing thing. Like I love a hard challenge, and this is definitely
Mhm.
one of them. And to be part of the solution instead of the person who's just complaining about how terrible the system is, like,
Mhm.
I believe in being very active in solving the problem. So if we can solve this problem by doing some of these creative things we're doing with strategy and the way we're thinking about longitudinal care of patients and all of these things, like there's a world where you as a patient, we know everything about you. You've already had x-rays, you've had a knee injection. Let's say you've gone to physical therapy. You don't even need to get a prior auth because we know you've already done the things. So it's already kind of sitting out there pre-approved, ready to go when you're ready for that. To me, that's a great system because it means we understand who you are as a patient. We know that at some point you're going to need your knee replaced and you just do it when you want because it's already been approved. Your insurance company understands it's happening and it takes out all the pressure of, okay, we got to get prior auth and we got to squeeze you in before the prior auth expires and we got to get this done. It just makes it, when is it good for Amy to have her knee replacement? And I think patients are always going to do best when things are in their control and when they're scheduled around their life versus trying to cram it in because different reasons. And so I do think we're going to have a much nicer world if we can get the overall healthcare system improved.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Big goals.
Yeah, to take on, but that's awesome. Any advice you have for patients?
Ask questions. Ask your physician, how much are you using AI to determine my diagnosis? Make sure the physician is asking about all the things in your life, your personal life. How are you sleeping? What's your diet like? What's your nutrition? Do you have stresses at home? All of the things that make you the person you are important to understanding your health conditions. Things like sleep. We have undervalued sleep in the past. And if you're not sleeping, that stress from not sleeping can cause problems that is solved with sleep, not medications. So just making sure they really understand you holistically as a person, I think is really important. And if you don't feel like your physician's asking those questions and they just want to treat an x-ray or a diagnostic imaging, like a MRI or something, and they're not actually treating you as a patient, I would say get another opinion or get another physician.
Yeah, it's hard.
It is hard, and it's hard to find, and it seems like all the great ones end up leaving out of frustration and,
Yeah.
do other things. And so you want to find someone who's passionate about you as a patient and cares about solving your individual problem.
Yeah. Do you miss working with patients?
100% miss working with patients. I
Yeah.
loved working with patients. What I don't miss is all the financial pressures of being in a practice and ever having to think about, oh, I need to see more patients or thinking about patients as dollars. I never did that and I never wanted to do that. But I do miss patients and I miss being in the OR. The OR is one of those great places where everyone is working kind of seamlessly as a team. In
Mhm.
order to do, like I would do a thumb arthroplasty case in less than an hour, and there's lots of moving pieces to that surgery. And, my scrub tech would just be handing me what I needed without even me asking. To have that kind of a team is really a special thing. And it's the OR is a very special place where people are trusting you with their lives, with their outcomes of their surgeries. It's hard to describe without being in it. But I do miss that. And I
Mhm.
was and I don't mean this I'm a great person, but I was a very good surgeon with great outcomes. And, my patients really appreciate everything. But I would stay in the OR and close the incision and make sure they had the right splint on because I really cared about everything all the way through to even how the incision looked. And so, I took a lot of pride in outcomes for my patients and they all did really well for the most part. And so I do miss it. Like, there's nothing better than someone coming in at 3 months after surgery and saying, "You've changed my life. I've gone back to golfing. I got my life back. I'm sleeping at night because my pain is gone." Like, there's nothing that'll ever replace that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those stories. I do like to end with some rapid fire questions. So you pick a category of family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Friends.
Okay. Things or actions I don't have that I want to have with friends.
I would love to be more proactive about reaching out to my friends rather than waiting for them to reach out to me when they need something. My life is very, very busy right now, and I would love to carve out more time for friends.
Yeah. Things or actions I do have that I want to keep with my friends.
I do think about my friends often, and I do hold them very near and dear to me, and they are just like my family. They are, what makes life important, and I don't ever want to lose sight of how important friends are.
Yeah. I think it does get discredited, right? Like with
Mhm.
man.
They are amazing, and knowing that you can pick up a phone on any day, like, I have friends that I haven't talked to in a year, and if I called them right now, they'd answer, like, that
Yeah.
to me is super important.
hmm Things or actions I don't have that I don't want to have.
I don't ever want to be superficial with friends. I don't ever wanna just have them to say I have a certain friend
Mhm.
because of their
Mhm.
status or something else. I only want friends with deep relationships who know me very well.
Yeah. Last one, things or actions that I do have that I don't want.
I probably am just too busy with all of the things I'm doing in my life, and I'm a hard worker and always have been. I currently start working at 5 in the morning because I'm on the West Coast and my company's on the East Coast, but I don't stop when I should, and I don't carve out enough time to do. Like, I would love to make it a priority to say, "Hey, I'm gonna go, have happy hour with a friend, or we're gonna go for a walk, or I'm gonna go do something." I need to carve out more time for that kind of thing instead of just heads down working all the time.
Yeah. So, is there anything that we didn't cover or you wanted to reiterate, before we close up this discussion?
I purposely chose friends over family because we did talk about my mom a lot, but I do think who your parents are, especially who your mom is, really defines you as an individual. And I feel very blessed and lucky that I had truly the most amazing mom. And many people who she wasn't a mother to would also tell you that. So, don't underestimate the value of your mother.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, great. So, thank you so much for joining today. And I'm sure our listeners are going to get a lot out of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Amy. It was nice chatting with you today.
And now for my mindful moments with this episode with Dr. Traci Granston. So fascinating to hear about her upbringing, where her father was an engineer and her mom was an art teacher, and just the differences in what she was able to perceive and how she was supported in her journey. We talked about how when she was younger, she was in ice skating. And just where that even came from. And one of the things that I think has come through on a number of these podcast interviews is when there's someone in your life that lets you know that anything is possible. And that was her mom. Her mom said she could be anything she wanted to be. And just the difference in that thinking versus so many of her stories where people were trying to deter her from her decisions of being a doctor, that voices are so powerful. And we have to be so careful in the advice that we give and how we're affecting someone, even if we think we might be being helpful. We also have to understand where maybe our own fears are coming up when we're giving advice to somebody else, and whether that is something we should put on someone else or allow them the space to be able to navigate their own life and feel supported while they do it. She talked about during ice skating that it ended quickly when she got third place instead of first place in a competitive ice skating competition where it was going for the Junior Olympics. And even though it seemed like a rash decision, there's probably things in our lives where we've had things in the backs of our head that something's not a fit or why it's not going to be a great long-term plan. And that's really what she talked about here, was really realizing that long-term, this really wasn't the path for her. And she ended up switching into taking care of horses and horseback riding. And one of the big lessons there was being responsible and paying for half and taking care of the horses, which actually has led in her life of not only healing animals, but humans. And she just felt so confident in her decision to become a doctor, even though she was being deterred not only by friends of the family, but also advisors she had at school, because there was such a small acceptance rate of women at the time. And that just goes to show you that sometimes we create these limiting beliefs in our head because we only see a few people that look like us and think that that opportunity is not available to us. But the fact is, we haven't been there yet. And maybe not enough people have broken through that barrier yet. And so in order for those barriers to be broken, it does take that time and effort and perseverance and belief in yourself that you can get there, which she proved in her story and was in private practice for a long time. But, we talked about the issues in healthcare and healthcare billing and how it drives the medical field to deal with patients, and it wasn't resonating with her. And she ended up going back to get her MBA. And in that process, she pivoted and was hired by a technology company that was utilizing AI in order to not only be able to do authorizations quicker, but also predict more what that patient is going to need and what the timeline of that was going to be. And I think this is another area where we just have to keep our eyes open and not be closed off to opportunities, because sometimes we can't even imagine what we'll be doing. If we look back now and realize where we're at today, could we have imagined this path to get there? Probably not. And so it's important for us to realize that our opportunities are available when we choose to see them, when we choose to say yes, when we choose to be open to those opportunities. And because of that, she's become an expert in a space she never thought she would know, which was AI and machine learning, but also has afforded her opportunities to be able to speak, to educate, be on boards, and serve in totally different ways than she ever imagined. So we kind of left off with that belief of who supports you. That could be a parent, that could be a friend, that could be a random teacher, a colleague. Wasn't even something that they had planned on or even know how they influence you. But those people become so important in your life to be able to shape the things that are possible for you going forward when you feel supported, when you feel that someone gives you an idea that maybe you never had before, and you're open to it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Breaking Beliefs. I know I did. And please join us for our next episode as well. And if there were things in here that you think would help somebody else, please share it as well. We love to get new listeners onto this podcast too. So thank you for all of your support. And just remember that your energy is contagious. So being intentional about how you show up is so important to help the people around you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.